Well, yesterday was a really tough message on adultery, and one person was so upset with me that they unfriended me because they said that I said the message too hard, too harsh. Listen, not everything in the Bible is kumbaya, okay? There's a lot of tough stuff in here. Some of it is exciting and exhilarating and, help to make you feel good. And other stuff is serious and make you think about what you're going to do. What I'm going to share today is pretty much the same thing, I thought I'd come out, do a little bit of this today. It's a beautiful day. It's not as windy as it was the last time I was out here, but you got people out here, grandparents walking their kids, people walking their dogs. Others, I noticed some ladies down there pushing a stroller, and they were all exercising. They'd stop at a certain spot and do jumping jacks and all that. So it's a nice day today, even though it's a tough subject. But okay, we're in Proverbs chapter 6, verses 30 through 35. Okay, now last time we talked about Solomon was warning the son about three things concerning adultery. He says, first of all, if you fool around with it, you're gonna get seduced. And then he says, if you do get seduced, you're gonna be reducted to a loaf of bread. In other words, you're gonna be made nothing. And then finally was gonna come execution. And that is, and he talked about, used analogy of, playing with fire or walking on fire. And anybody that does that, if you play with fire, what's going to happen? You're going to get burnt. Okay, today he's going to make a contrast between a thief and an adulterer. And so it's pretty interesting, the conclusion he draws from this contrast. Okay, well, let me just read this verse to you. And here he doesn't say son, he says men. He starts off men in verse 30. Men, do not despise a thief if he steals, to satisfy his hunger when he is starving. Okay, so he said not to despise him, okay? And it's one thing to steal. It's another thing to steal because you're hungry or you're trying to feed your family, okay? He's still guilty for stealing. And so he's saying don't despise him, for doing that. And then he says, yet, and here's a make contrast here, if he is caught, he must pay sevenfold, though it cost him all the wealth of his house. So even if he does it for a noble purpose to feed himself or his family, if he's caught, he still has to pay the consequences. Okay? So that's what he says concerning the thief. Now, it's not any kind of thief, but it's a thief that's trying to satisfy his hunger. Okay, so now he's going to compare that with an adulterer. And he used the word but. Remember, I've told you in Bible study methods that but is what's called a contrast connective. And here you're going to have a change in direction. And he does. He says, but a man who commits adultery lacks judgment. Whoever does so destroys himself. Blows and disgrace are his lot, and his shame will never be wiped away. Okay, so it's one thing to not despise a man that is stealing. It's a whole nother thing if you catch somebody in adultery. And in the state of Texas and most of the United States, they have a law, and I'm going to do it two ways, because you have laws and then you have God's laws. Okay, you got man's laws and God's. Man's laws is if you are a normal person and you come home and you catch your wife or your spouse, whatever, in bed with another person, you didn't premeditate murder. You didn't plan it. You didn't plot it. But that situation so enraged you that you ended up killing both of them. Okay, when that happens in the States, for the most part, the charge is not murder, but manslaughter. Okay, it's called passion killing. Not so in the Bible. Okay? And so if you come home and catch your spouse in that situation, let's see what the Bible has to say. Okay. And then it says, blows and disgrace are his lot, and his shame will never be wiped. For jealousy arouses a husband fury, and he will show no mercy when he takes revenge. He will not accept any compensation. He will refuse to bribe, however great it is. See, the thief can pay his way out of trouble, not the adulterer. You know, I think of the story of David and Bathsheba. David's the king, could have had any woman he wanted, his whole kingdom. He's out one night looking from his palace, and he sees this beautiful woman, Bathsheba, bathing herself. He inquired who she was, found out that she was Uriah's wife, and he sent his servants to get her and bring her to his house, and there he committed adultery with her. And he thought he got away with it until she sent word a couple months later that she was pregnant by him. Now, couldn't have been her husband because he's out at war. So what does David do? He calls Uriah home and tries to get him to sleep with his wife so that he could believe that he was the one that made her pregnant. Uriah, though, was an honorable man. He wasn't going to go sleep with his wife while the rest of his men were out at war. So he slept at the gates. Okay, so David then tried to get him drunk and then send him home. Again, Uriah didn't go home. So you know what David did? He writes a letter, puts it in an envelope, gives it to Uriah to send to the commanding officer, and inside the letter, he told the commanding officer to put Uriah in the very front line and withdraw from him so that he would be killed. David killed this man's only wife, plotted to have him think that he was the one that made her pregnant, and then sent him to his death, and then covered it up until Nathan the prophet came to him months later and told him what he had done. Okay, now, if I was Uriah and I found out, or I came in and saw David committing adultery with my wife, I probably would have killed both of them right then and there. Well, let me tell you, that happened to me. Okay, when I was in the service. But unfortunately, I didn't catch him. I found out. And so let me read this verse, and I'll tell you what happened. It says here, he says, for jealousy arouses a husband fury, and he will show no mercy when he takes revenge. Now, we're not talking about a passion killing here. We're talking about revenge. Okay, so I decided that's what I was going to do. And I talked to some buddies of mine, and they say, hey man, you kill them, you kill him, you're going to go to prison. She's out screwing around with other guys while you're in prison. Is that what you want to do? So I wasn't, unfortunately, I didn't catch him in the act. So I had time to think about it and think, well, you know what ended up happening? She ended up marrying that guy. She then ended up getting divorced from him. She then went 2 other guys. Both of them died in a disastrous way. Their health completely shot. You know, I didn't take the vengeance, God did. Okay? Now, there are serious consequences here if you get involved in adultery. And, you know, there's a lot of things you can recover from. This is one thing that's not easily recovered from. Now, there are cases where, you know, the woman was caught in adultery and Jesus told her, go and sin no more. And then also the woman that had 5 husbands, and yet Jesus used her. Yes, there's always recoverment, you know, but the consequences still remain. And any emotional pain, it says here, it says, blows and disgrace are his lot. His shame will never be wiped away. I'll never forget when I was a young boy in France, there was this coach that I really looked up to. And because I played a whole lot of sports when I was in Europe. And one day my mom and dad were talking about him, and I heard a few words, and I finally asked my dad what happened. And he told me that he had fathered the child from another woman other than his wife. And you know, it so shocked me that, you know, it's not that I lost respect for him. It's like all of a sudden he was not the same man to me anymore, you know, and I almost felt sorry for him, you know. And so there's a lot of shame that comes along with, you know, committing adultery and getting involved in immorality, and also the great danger of getting yourself killed, you know, in a very real way. I mean, in a day that goes by in the city, you don't read about passion killings, you know. And then others that go and plot revenge and they actually carry them out. A lot of guys in prison right now that are in there because they went and shot the guy and their wives, or, you know. So Solomon is warning here. He says he will not accept any compensation. He will refuse to bribe, however great it is. No matter what you offer to make the situation right. He may tell you in his face, yeah, it's okay, go your way, brother, I know, you know. But deep down, I mean, Christians, deep down inside, we're thinking, yeah, I'm going to forgive this guy, let him go today. Tomorrow you may feel a whole different way. You know, so there's a tremendous danger in fooling around with women that are not your wife, okay? Okay, I'm going to go and enjoy this day. Tomorrow, tomorrow, he's going to be even more graphic in chapter 7 about warning against adulteress, you know, and it's going to continue on all the way until chapter 8, and he's going to start comparing wisdom and folly. Remember, there's 4 mindsets in the book of Proverbs: the naive, the fool, the scoffer, and the wise. Do you think the wise is the one that commits adultery? No. What about the scoffer? Possibly. What about the fool? Definitely. The naive, those are the ones he's trying to warn not to go there. Okay, God bless you all. Have a great day.